Hi everyone, Austin here. Today I'd like to talk about terrain in World Conqueror 3 and how to use it. Alright, so let's just go over here to Conquest. And first, let's start what is terrain. It might be quite obvious for most people, but I'll still explain. So, you've got here a map that is divided into grids like hexagons, and some don't have any kind of drawing over them. Some have like trees, and some have mountains, some have grass. There are also deserts, and there are, of course, oceans. So let's first start with these empty tiles. These are called plains, and they don't give you any kind of bonuses nor penalties. And these are just the most common basic tiles in the game. Then there are grasslands. Let's just find some over here. So they give you 5% damage reduction for artillery units and 10% damage reduction for tank units. And that's pretty nice. Next you've got forests, which give you pretty much the same as grasslands but doubled. So 20% for tanks, 10% for artillery, and they also give you a movement penalty. So when you are moving through a forest, then it will take a bit more mobility to do that than if you were moving on plains. Next we've got mountains, which are divided into low mountains and high mountains. Low mountains give you 5% damage reduction for tank, 10% for artillery, and they take one more marching point than plain tiles do. So moving through a plain tile takes 3 mobility. Each unit has some mobility, as you can see here. Marching ability 5. Let's take a look between different units. Here we've got 6. Here, for example, 12. So it differs between every unit, but moving on a plain tile takes 3 of the movement ability you have. So for example, a armored car with mobility of 12 can move through 4 of these plain tiles, but moving through low mountains takes 4 movement, so you can only move through 3 grids then instead of 4. We've got also tall mountains, which take 5 mobility, so moving through them you could only move 2 tiles. So it is much more difficult to move through mountains than through regular terrain. However, infantry is not affected by these changes. They can move as easily in mountains as they do in regular terrain. So that's pretty nice. Then you get deserts, which give you 10% damage reduction for both tanks and artillery. And they also give you, like, forests, a slight penalty for movement. However, it is not as large as mountains, I think. Next we've got ocean, which acts very much like plain tiles, except for when you want to enter an ocean area, you have to stop on shore, and on the next turn you can march 1 grid into the ocean. So let's just show you maybe here with UK. I should be able to show it. So we've got a unit that is right next to sea, and we can enter ocean. Then it turns into like landing craft, something like that. But for example, here we have a unit that does not border and it's not on shore, doesn't border an ocean grid, so it has to move first closer to shore, and then on the next turn it has to enter the ocean. And when unit enters ocean in this turn, it can only do it like 1 grid, and then to move further it can do it on the next turn. So The ocean, as I said, acts a bit like planes, so free mobility for one grid of movement, and the land units. So all tanks, artillery, and infantry on ocean deal less damage than they would on land. However, they take the same amount of damage, so they don't take more damage like in World Conqueror 4. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it from terrain. So maybe I should also cover cities. Okay, so cities, they generally act like planes. However, there are some perks that some commanders have. Like, let's just go over here to academies, and let me just find, for example, here we've got plane fighting, and deal extra damage to the enemy in plane warfare. So you have to be on a tile of that specific terrain for this perk to activate. So for example, for plane fighting, you must be on plane, and then it will activate and give you the extra damage. And there are also other perks like desert fighting, so you have to be in desert, mountain. Yeah, so there's one for each terrain. For ocean, there's a bit different perk, sailor, which gives you less damage, but there's also one. And there's a bit interesting street fighting, because it gives you extra damage in cities. Yeah, that makes sense. Urban fighting, yeah, street fighting, extra damage in the cities. However, as I said, cities act like planes in this game. So, plane fighting actually also activates in cities. So, not only planes, the most common tiles in the game, but also cities. So, plane fighting is extremely overpowered and is recommended to be applied to each single one of your commanders. It's really powerful. 20 damage on max level on pretty much half of the tiles in the game, but considering that you won't be just moving to random tiles, but you'll actually think about where you move, you can almost always get that extra 20 damage. So why is there urban fighting, street fighting in the game? I don't know, ask Izitach. And for jungle fighting, I think it only activates in forest tiles, and not in these grass tiles. So, like mountain fighting activates both in low mountains and in high mountains. However, jungle fighting activates only, I think, in the forests, not in like these grass fields. And why is it called jungle fighting, not forest fighting? I know. I mean, in most of the map you have just forests, regular forests, not really something you could call jungle. You have some here in like Africa, I think South America. No, in South America you get regular forests. So, mostly. You have some jungles, I guess. Anyway, that's doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't have to, I guess. Either way, now you know how to use terrain in World War 3. And thanks everyone for watching. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please like and subscribe, and see you next time.